Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here alongside Mike Gallagher to break down a big Tuesday slate. 9 games on the docket tonight. Once again, in the NBA, we're further and further away from health and safety protocol season, but we are still in injury season. There's plenty of injuries to talk about on this show. With that in mind, Mike, how did you enjoy the game last night with Mark Dankenbring? Got a little hike in this morning. How's the day been for the ETR NBA crew out in
Awesome, man.
Phoenix?
Denk and I are best buds now. He's gonna move in, and then I'm gonna move in for half the year too. But yeah, thanks to man. Meeting his fiance Maggie was really cool. She's awesome, and we had a great time just watching the game, talking about basketball and life and stuff. It was really cool. But we had a good hike this morning. Did North Mountain. It's been nice to talk a little basketball and smell the rose at the same time. That's like ideal for me. So feeling pretty good.
Nice. Awesome. Fantastic. Good to hear. Glad you got a competitive game given the circumstances of the guys last night, because that was certainly a concern. With that said, let's talk about the games tonight. And the big news on tonight's slate, the big game on the slate is Los Angeles and Brooklyn, the two teams that many thought were title contenders coming into the season. The two of us thought one of these teams was a title contender coming into the season. Not to tout our own horn too much, but the Lakers, they get their best version of themselves back tonight. They get Anthony Davis back. What does that mean for Lakers rotations? And what does that mean for, from a DFS and fantasy perspective? Do we think AD is going to be full go right off the bat? It's been a while since we last saw Anthony Davis.
Yeah, probably not full go. I mean, this crept up on us pretty quick. We saw that questionable tag over the weekend. And then, he's available to play today, or probable, I should say, which probable for the Lakers means he's playing. But, probably won't play low 30s. Maybe he gets to 30 on a good day. But, I mean, they obviously feel comfortable playing him here. So there's a chance Dwight Howard goes away entirely. I mean, they were running out like Stanley Johnson and Ariza at these center minutes, obviously going from that to AD. We've seen Vogel say multiple times they want to space the floor and go small as their ideal lineup. They've been calling it their defensive lineup with Dwight. Like, they do not value him for offense whatsoever. So, I think he could probably come out maybe entirely. We'll see what kind of minutes we get, see if he starts or whatever. We've seen him start in certain spots, but I mean, against a team like Brooklyn, with the way they're going to attack you with the perimeter, you would think AD starts there. So then, sure, there'll be some minutes for Monk and Bradley and Ariza, but it's just going to be those three big guys. We'll see Westbrook usage come down a little bit. I don't think LeBron's really been affected. He hasn't really been affected in a couple of years. We've seen them together, so those guys are still capable of putting up big lines. But it'll be interesting to see how Westbrook fits in this offense. He was starting to play a little bit better here, but pretty much the three big guys are bust. I think Carmelo's upside's probably pretty thin. I don't know what his price is, but it had to be really low to be entertaining.
One of the interesting things here is, part of this is just from when the sample was. Like earlier in the season, Russ was carrying a little bit more weight in the offense. LeBron was down a little bit in the offense. And then obviously when LeBron got switched to the center position, all the fantasy production started to spike in terms of the rebounding and different things. So if you look at the actual rates from this year, what we've seen from Russ is not really much difference in usage with him without AD, but a big jump in his assist rate, actually. He's had like a 30% assist rate or so in the games without Anthony Davis, and it's been up to like 37% in the games with Anthony Davis. And some of those were also with LeBron out. So it's kind of it's a weird mix of a sample to try to figure out when all three are together. We haven't had a ton of it. When AD has played, we've seen LeBron's rebounding rate go down quite a bit because he's been playing more center of late in the games without AD. We've also seen his usage rate come down from like mid 30s, like 33 or so, down to like 30. So we would normally expect the usage rate to come down for both Russ and LeBron when AD's mixed in as well. We'd also expect it to impact some of the secondary guys as well. But most of the secondary Lakers players you weren't really considering anyway. Occasionally you look at Malik Monk, but someone like him is going to certainly lose a lot of usage here. The interesting thing for me from a fantasy perspective is, will LeBron still play some center minutes? And if so, I think the fantasy production will remain pretty strong, especially if they have lineups where LeBron is the center and they stagger Russ and AD together off and let LeBron be like an offense unto himself with four other floor spacers. Or will this be, in that case, that also might help Russ. Give him a pick and roll partner, give him some things to do that are a little bit different than what he's been able to do with LeBron at the 5, which is more of LeBron handling the ball and not, Russ kind of standing in the corner waiting for secondary action. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out for the Lakers. We have seen Russ de-emphasized a little bit over the last few weeks. it'll be interesting to see if having another kind of big man role man could potentially infuse a little juice into Russ's fantasy profile, which has been very stagnant of late. But I think this is, the big game everyone wants to see, all the stars on the floor. Well, not all the stars on the floor. We're down to Harden on Brooklyn's side and LeBron and AD and Russ on the Lakers side. But I think it's the big headline for tonight. Other injury situations to check in on for Charlotte. Gordon Hayward is listed as questionable tonight. Charlotte going into Toronto. We've seen Charlotte play with all sorts of different combinations of players in and out during the course of the season. So they have a decent handle on who would benefit in the absence of Gordon Hayward. But do you think he's likely to play tonight?
Yeah, so he couldn't go through a light workout yesterday. And just going through the Hornets social media, you see Rozier, you see Melo, you see Cody Martin, you see all these other Hornets. I don't see Hayward, so I don't think he's playing. So that would mean Cody Martin likely starts again. See a little bit of more PJ Washington off the bench, more Oubre if he can kind of get hot, maybe get up to the upper 20s if he's playing a little bit better. And then we saw some James Bouknight. Maybe he sticks. Played not terribly, but I mean he's not really going to be valuable there. But Martin would be a little bit someone to look at. Obviously Bridges would have a higher ceiling. Same with Rozier and LaMelo.
The other thing I note, they're playing a Toronto team that is very comfortable playing their main guys heavy minutes, and sometimes we've seen Charlotte's rotations tighten as well based on the opponent. So it is a spot that if Gordon Hayward was out tonight, I could see Charlotte playing a very, very tight rotation and like really leaning into getting the minutes up there on Bridges, on PJ Washington, on Cody Martin. Like I could see that really, really happening. On the other side of this game, Fred VanVleet was added as a late ad as questionable for Toronto. We've been talking about Toronto for weeks now, and Nick Nurse's nuttiness in terms of wanting to play like 6-7 man rotations, and just wondering when is it going to come back to bite some of these Toronto players, because they're playing so much more basketball than most of the other stars in the league. I mean, we're talking about 20 more minutes a week of basketball that they're playing than most of the other strong players. That's half a game extra. When they're playing 4 games a week, their guys are really playing 4.5 compared to everybody else who's playing 4 in the league. So at some point you figure that this would kind of work itself out. That could be the case tonight with Fred VanVleet. Late add to the injury report here, always a concern on those midday ads.
And back-to-back, they play tomorrow too, so certainly some risk there. Right knee soreness, does not have a history of a knee injury, just quick searching through. Only a couple knee contusions in his NBA career per my searching skills. So he should be, probably minor. Obviously, it's more of a maintenance thing, you would think. Back-to-back related here. I forget who they play somebody I think pretty good tomorrow. Who is it again? They play the Bulls in Chicago tomorrow. So definitely, they got a tough schedule coming up here at Chicago, at Miami, at Atlanta. Look at that schedule.
This is the stretch. We had talked about they had made a little bit of run. You look towards the end of that December, early January, they had made a little run. They had gotten healthy. They'd had a lot of home games, and this was the stretch. Lots of road games for Toronto. And so far, it hasn't gone so well. They've been, trying to keep their head above water, but it's been a tough stretch. And losing that home game to Portland was certainly a disappointment. If VanVleet is out, how do you think Toronto would respond? Like, who do we expect to jump up into that rotation spot and play a lot in the absence of Fred VanVleet?
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Scotty Barnes starting at the point. Nurse was asked about, the non-VanVleet point guard minutes, and he said he wants to kind of take turns with Siakam and Scotty Barnes. We've seen them run that that big lineup with Siakam, Precious, and Boucher in the front court all the time. So I think, honestly, they'll probably start that way. They do not feel comfortable. They're running 6 guys over Malachi Flynn, right? So, it just makes sense.
Yeah, I think in terms of guards, I think the next guy in line would be Banton. To take minutes based on the way that they've been playing. Banton seems to be ahead of Svi and ahead of Malachi Flynn, who coming into the season, I would have guessed those guys would have been ahead of him. But so it sounds like you'd think, would it be Boucher or Achua? They've started Achua above Boucher in those spots before, with Boucher then playing the primary, bench reserve minutes there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting spot. Would certainly be a boon to Scotty Barnes' value, just in terms of assists. It would potentially be one for Siakam as well, as we've seen him dish out a ton and have a strong games of potential assists.
Yep.
But this is a spot where you actually, if you remove VanVleet, you actually could see some Toronto value. We've been saying, before, these guys are all priced so aggressively that it's hard to find value, even though one guy could hit on a given night because of how much they're playing. You remove one of these guys, and all of a sudden you have the potential for a lot of value. I will caution, it is always difficult for us to project Toronto when they're missing big pieces because it's hard to assume Nurse will go as concentrated as he does. And so the risk on our side, usually it's not the case, but the risk on our side, specific with Toronto, is over projecting role players because he can pull the plug on things real quick. He can diversify and like just kind of like give everybody a shot to see who's fitting. So just be careful. We will try to as well if VanVleet is out in terms of projecting Banton or Champagny or Watanabe or those types of guys. It's going to be very hot handy in terms of who gets those opportunities. I think the guys that they're comfortable with have clearly been Siakam, Anunoby, Barnes, Trent, Boucher, and Achua.
Yeah. I'd be pretty surprised if they start Banton. I feel it sounds pretty crazy, but I feel pretty confident they're going to start Scotty at the point. So I'll be curious to see if he's out. So I'll be curious to see what kind of prices he's at. He's been pretty underpriced the last few slates.
Okay, let's talk Denver, where Jeff Green is questionable, as is Marcus Howard, which, I don't think Marcus Howard will necessarily play or even be in the rotation. But, man, does Denver need guard depth just desperately kind of as the season goes on here? We've seen them trade for Bryn Forbes, which has helped things out. This is a little bit of a softer part of their schedule here with the back-to-back, not back-to-back, but, home and home with Detroit. So it is a spot where, they could choose. They have a little bit more front court depth than back court depth. Could choose to get a spot off for Jeff Green if they wanted. We saw them play without Jeff Green last time out. We saw basically Austin Rivers slide into that starting lineup spot and them go a little bit deeper on the guards. They have the backups to do it with Najee and having brought in DeMarcus Cousins. What do you think the likelihood of us seeing Jeff Green is tonight?
It sounds like he's got a good chance. And the beat guys were saying that he was playing a bunch, got dinged up, quad contusion. Quad contusions are kind of like a back injury. Sometimes you just don't know how they're feeling the next day. So I think he's got a pretty good chance to play. That would, cut out Zeke Najee a lot. I still think DeMarcus Cousins locks down those center minutes behind Joker. Malone seemed pretty happy. He called it a little bit rusty, but he was really encouraged about how DeMarcus looked over the weekend. So, that'll cut down because we saw Jeff Green get some center minutes a little bit with JaMychal out and stuff. So probably a little thin to go there. But, that would obviously take Austin Rivers out of the equation and, some of the other guys would be affected too. And Bones Hyland didn't play in the last game for illness too. So we saw Marcus Howard get hot like when Bones was in the doghouse for violating team rules like a month ago. Yeah. So I think it's probably one of those guys, not both, in the rotation there. I would think Bones has the edge given, he's been a little shaky, but Malone loves that dude.
The DeMarcus Cousins stuff is really interesting for me just from a real-life basketball perspective because he seems to get these 10-day contracts with teams, and then teams immediately kind of prioritize getting him playing time. It's been surprising that he immediately leapfrogged JaMychal Green in the rotation because JaMychal Green was kind of a key free agent signing for them in terms of adding depth behind Jokic. And so it's interesting to me that these teams keep prioritizing Boogie for the 10-day contracts, but then let him go. And they didn't feel he was good enough to kind of sign in the first place. So it's just a strange situation and one that I think will be a little bit fragile in terms of projecting minutes behind. It's not a big deal. Just would note that, Boogie Cousins has much bigger rates than anybody else that he would play instead of. And as a result, when you add him into the rotation, it does take a little bit off the top from kind of all the other guys in terms of the projection point. So just something to note there. On the other side of it with Detroit, Frank Jackson is questionable. The question is, will we see Frank Jackson back? When he was playing before earlier in the season, he was really integral to their second unit and kind of bench unit and would oftentimes get into the upper 20s in minutes when they felt like, Killian Hayes wasn't playing as well or different things like that. So, we saw Corey Joseph start over Killian Hayes last time out. There's some, just been some push and pull at the guard spot. We've seen Magruder play a lot lately after being kind of out of the rotation and then getting in on a back-to-back. So what do you think on Frank Jackson? And if it does return, do you think it'll take some time for him to kind of work up to the role that he had earlier in the season? Or do you think that role is strictly, hot hand dependent and he just happened to have it going early in the season?
No, I think they want to play him. I mean, he's they need spacing in that second unit especially. So I think he's going to find minutes. The question, as you kind of alluded to, is who gets cut out. And as hot as he's been, I think Rodney Magruder would be at risk. Obviously, Cassius Stanley would kind of go away regardless. We hit some Hamidou Diallo foul trouble, which led to a little bit of a 3-guard lineup with Cade Cunningham, Killian, and Corey Joseph. And Casey said he wanted to play it more, which is interesting. So if Jackson does come back and they do want to run that 3-guard lineup out there a little bit more, then you're talking about a cap ceiling for Hamidou Diallo, obviously Frank Jackson as well. So all things to kind of consider. So it's kind of dicey here. I think they really like Kojo in that first unit, so I think he might stick, and let Killian kind of be a bit bigger offensive force. He's been so lackluster as an offensive option to score. So putting him in there and letting him shoot some threes and really kind of dominate the ball without Cade, I think he's kind of comfortable. I think that may help him grow because he just hasn't really had anything despite kind of an encouraging and buzzy offseason. So I think he might stick. So Kojo should still have some value, but you're not like pumped to play Frank Jackson, but I think he's going to find minutes and cut out some of these other like fringy rotation guys.
Yeah, and probably just devalues all of the Detroit guards a little bit in a matchup that you're not super excited to play them anyway. Matisse Thybulle for Philadelphia. They're without Seth Curry, without Danny Green. They're pretty limited on the wings and the bench, and we've just seen Joel Embiid basically carrying things. Making a case for the second best player in the league. Once again, another year in a row here, which is a great case to be made. I mean, second best player in the league is awesome. That's worthy. They should give out an award for him for that.
Okay.
But without Thybulle, or with Thybulle questionable tonight, do you think we see him return? They've been without Danny Green, Shake Milton, Seth Curry, and Paul Reed of late. So you've seen more Korkmaz. You've seen Maxi's minutes occasionally get up there. But really what you've seen is just Embiid have a ton of usage of late. So what do we think about Thybulle's ability to return tonight?
Yeah, it was listed with a shoulder sprain, had a really bad fall, was actually playing through it the first time, so shout out to him for playing through that. But yeah, upgrade to questionable is usually a pretty good sign. I feel like the Sixers they're not good at putting players on the injury report, but they're pretty good at taking them off. So I feel like he's got a pretty good shot to play. As you mentioned, Charlie Brown goes bye-bye. They really use him as kind of their best defensive option because nobody else is really there. So he would go really, really cut down. Obviously, Cork's minutes upside would come down a little bit. Wouldn't see the crazy upside on Maxey, but you would still see a ton. Like I still think he could hit 40 here. He will almost certainly get Herb. So I will not be into Maxey there. I would expect Josh Hart. Oh, I'm sorry, Hart's not playing. So that Tobias Harris would have an interesting matchup there too.
I would expect no one to get into the 40s tonight for Philadelphia because this is this should be a disaster unless Philadelphia really plays with their food a lot. We'll talk about the New Orleans side. They are not playing anybody tonight.
Yep. I think probably
that game is inched up to an 11-point spread now, and I would not be surprised if it closes higher as well. Yeah. Just given the nature of what New Orleans intends to play tonight.
Yep.
Let's talk about
New Orleans. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we might as well now. There, no Jonas Valanciunas, no Brandon Ingram, no Josh Hart, no Devontae Graham. It's basically all their starters. They only have 9 guys available tonight, so we know who's going to play. We just don't know how much guys are going to play. It's going to be a situation where you would expect to see. I think you can feel confident that Garrett Temple and Herb Jones are going to start. Then I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker probably played well enough last night to have earned a starting spot here. And then you think it's going to be Willie Hernangomez to match up with Embiid over Jackson Hayes. Which certainly Hernangomez is much bigger body and probably more adept to do that. But it's hard to project given Hayes has been playing ahead of Hernangomez. So we'll kind of wait for starters there. We're just splitting them down the middle to start. And then the question is, is it Satoransky? Is it Alvarado? Alvarado has been playing well ahead of Satoransky for the last few weeks. But it's a tough spot. So we'll see with what they start, but they're only going to have 9 guys. Like Najee Marshall and Gary Clark are going to have to play a decent bit. I don't think they're going to want to play Garrett Temple 35 minutes on the second night of a back-to-back in a game that they're double-digit underdogs. So we're going to try to manage the minutes ceiling on some of these guys, just thinking the game won't be competitive. But if the game isn't competitive down the stretch, who do you think? I think Alvarado's in there. I think Hayes is in there. I think Najee Marshall's in there. I think Gary Clark's in there. And then the 5th guy, I don't really know who they would have in at that point. I think it would not be Temple. It would not be Hernangomez. Probably not be Satoransky.
No, I think it might be Satoransky just because, like, I mean, well, I guess it's. I'll take if I can take it from there. So, like, why I think Billy Hernan Gomez is starting. So, like, Willie Green views them very differently defensively. Like, he likes Jackson Hayes as more of like a team defender, where like there's a lot of switching, there's a lot of like pick and roll being run. Like, that's his guy. But if he wants, like, okay, you're going up against a big center who scores a lot, like, you would go with Billy Hernan Gomez. So I feel pretty good that he's going to start and just kind of bring Jackson Hayes off the bench, keep him in that role. And we've seen Billy Hernan Gomez usually get the start anyways when Valanciunas misses games too. So makes a lot of sense for him to start. Do you think Alvarado starts? I could be wrong. We've seen Satoransky start at the point almost to a fault. So there's definitely a pretty good chance he starts there. They obviously are going to bring him in. As you mentioned, they only got 9 guys, so I don't think they'd run it out there 8, especially in a back-to-back. Don't want to keep the minutes too high on Herb and those guys. And, I see people talking about Herb. So, like, Herb almost always guards the ball handler, partly because of no heart. So I had to probably look at some non-heart minutes and see how he guarded. But I still kind of think he takes Maxey. But, they could
I
put
think
Temple
that'll be
on.
challenging based on the rest of the personnel that they'll have.
Yeah, but they might put Temple on him too.
I think just
the way
you think through it and you get into a spot where, like, who the hell guards Tobias? If it's not Herb, from like a size perspective, I guess it would be probably Temple in that spot.
Temple,
but like, Alvarado is going to have a size mismatch. Like, I guess he could just hide on Tybal if Tybal was back.
Yeah,
but otherwise would be a real size.
That's another point Satoransky too.
Right.
To start Satoransky for defense. So maybe he starts. The more we think about it, and just keep Alvarado in that role. But Alvarado could certainly close, especially if they're falling behind and they need offense.
Yeah.
We probably should just straight level up Alvarado and Sato and thinking about it a little bit more. But
there's certainly going to be a lot of DFS value here because these guys are all going to be super cheap and not playing a lot. And so I like to think of, like, okay, well, who do I feel is going to play in a non-competitive situation and is willing to rack up stats? And the guys that jump out to me that could fill that role is Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Najee Marshall. Those are the 2 guys that kind of, immediately kind of stick out to me. I think the bigs are going to be interesting because they're so cheap, and like you're going to project one ahead of the other for sure once we get a starting lineup. But like one of them is going to, Embiid could roll through both of these guys in terms of foul rates. Like Hernan Gomez is not very quick and not super agile, so Embiid can absolutely kill him there. And then if he gets Hayes, like Embiid has a huge size advantage on Hayes. So you could see these guys both get into foul trouble. It wouldn't even surprise me. So I think you're going to be forced to kind of look into Pelicans bigs, but I probably am actually a little bit more excited to dive into some of the wings. And if the game is uncompetitive, think that they might still have the opportunity to produce.
Yeah, and it's gonna be tough to research this, but I'm going to because I really want to figure out who Herb's going to guard. But Herb has very much been a guard guy, on who he guards. He doesn't guard fours really all that much. So it's gonna be curious to see how Willie Green's going to want to use him, especially I don't know. I still think he probably goes on Maxey. We'll see because Temple's got enough size, and Tobias hasn't been very good, so I think it could maybe set up for him. But it's obviously going to be the Embiid show.
All right, Brooklyn, they are without Kyrie Irving because he is ineligible to play. It's a home game. Still without Kevin Durant for a while with that MCL sprain. No David Duke Jr. or Paul Millsap either. Nick Claxton is questionable on the injury report. What are your thoughts on Claxton's availability tonight? And how does this matchup impact kind of how they would use bigs as a whole in general? They've gotten Aldridge back. We've seen they've been happy with the way Deron Sharp has played, but this seems to be a spot that might not even kind of need those types of bigs.
Yeah, not really, especially with how small they're going. Kessler Edwards has completely won minutes, according to Steve Nash. He says he's earned it. So really no signs of him losing playing time. We've seen, this last game, he got pretty good usage. 10 shots for him is good. So taking Kyrie out of the mix, I assume he's cheap. He's maybe someone to look at as a punt because the minutes are going to be there. And he's a guy that can match up against LeBron and those guys. I think this feels like a little bit more of, just going, like bigger at like the 3-4. So like maybe we see, some of those, Patty being more of like a 2-guard lineup and then filling the Kyrie minutes more of like Bembry, maybe Camp Thomas would be getting more into the mix here as well. Not a guy you'd really lean into, but I think James Johnson also is, a guy that can guard LeBron in some spots, guard AD in some spots, especially if you're switching and stuff. He feels like he's pretty valuable in this matchup. I don't know if I would go there. because it's going to be very very Harden season much, but Harden's going to probably be super chalk, great matchup for him too. So have to look at the prices. We'll certainly talk about in the DFS show, but Nash is really picky on playing some of his role players. But I feel Kessler Edwards' minutes are safe. LaMarcus's minutes are safe off the bench. Obviously Harden, Mills will be pretty good in the minutes, but Bembry and Cam Thomas, those guys are probably going to be a little borderline.
If Claxton does play, is Sharp still?
Actually, yeah, I skipped the Claxton part. Yeah, so Claxton said he quote probably not is going to play in the home games. They play home and home and then go on the road. So I mean, it's kind of hard to think that he would play in this front end of a back to back. We'll see if something changes despite the clutch protect. So I'd be pretty surprised if he plays.
So do you think Sharp is in under that scenario? Like, is
I
Sharp
think so.
starting?
I think they like him in that role. Maybe that changes taking Kyrie out and want a little bit more offense. So I don't feel quite confident in that, but yeah, I think LaMarcus gets pretty good minutes. Had some foul trouble the last game. Yeah, I still think it's Sharp. I think they like him there, but it definitely could be LaMarcus without Kyrie because they've been on the road really since LaMarcus has come back. So
Yeah,
taking Kyrie out of the mix, yeah, I take that back. I think it's going to be LaMarcus. I think that makes a little bit more sense.
but Sharp would still be in the rotation because the concern is obviously do they?
Well,
even
maybe
need
not though. I mean, because if they want to use James Johnson in that, if they do play LeBron at center, then you probably want to use James Johnson in that spot. So if Sharp doesn't start, you can't go there. So yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, always difficult to figure out the secondary players with Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it has a huge impact on the slate because even though going up against Lakers, you want to attack there, I think the New Orleans situation is going to allow enough value. But maybe for MME stuff, you want to take some shots, and we'll do our best to kind of figure and sort through that out. I know we have Claxton in currently and Sharp not even in the rotation, so that's something that definitely needs to be adjusted. Yeah. All right, moving on. Sacramento, this is another big spot. Chimezie Metu got moved to doubtful, but the bigger news, I think, is De'Aaron Fox and Damian Jones are both questionable, specifically De'Aaron Fox, obviously. In his absence, you see a lot more ball handling for Tyrese Halliburton. Big upside in terms of assist totals, point totals, everything. They just lose a lot of offensive potential. We saw Harrison Barnes get up 18 shots, Terrence Davis get up 18 shots, so a more diversified offensive profile in those spots. Do you think we see De'Aaron Fox return tonight?
I think he's got a shot. It is a back-to-back, so that's certainly something to be concerned about. But yeah, probably be a game-time decision, worst case. I have to find out. Next time you give me a second, I'm going to find out if this is his bad ankle that he's hurt before. But yeah, I think he's got a pretty good shot to play, but probably going to be game time 50-50-ish, so don't really have a strong lean there.
And if he doesn't, do you think we see the same type of rotation? Obviously, Metu didn't play as much last time. You could have maybe just slide those minutes to Harkless type situation here. Or one of the other true centers, Tristan Thompson, Alex Len, those types of guys. But do you think we'd see the similar type of rotation with a heavy offensive reliance on Halliburton and Harrison Barnes?
Yeah, they just bring in Harkless essentially to fill those minutes too. So in a matchup where you want that kind of a defender, we've seen Alvin Gentry use Harkless as a LeBron guy. So Tatum is, he's 30 years younger than LeBron is, but he's got similar skill set offensively. So definitely, I think Harkless would get in the rotation for sure.
All right, Klay Thompson questionable for Golden State tonight. You have to think Golden State would be as conservative as they possibly could with Klay on all these fronts. So I'm guessing that we probably don't see Klay tonight. What is your expectation?
Yeah, didn't practice, knee discomfort. The medical staff guy held him out. I mean, this has been a 2-year rehab for him. He has knee discomfort. You just sit him for a week, in my opinion. Not putting him through practice. They're not doing shoot around today because the guys are tired. So I think he sits, and should add that De'Aaron Fox, this is the grade 3 ankle that kept him out back in 2020. So that's a little bit more concerning there, considering the severity of that ankle sprain. But yeah, I think they sit Klay. Also some notes from Steve Kerr that were interesting I wanted to share, saying that the plan is to keep Andrew Wiggins as the guy on defense, and they'll just use Klay as a secondary defender, which kind of makes sense, right? Wiggins has been pretty good in that role. So good news for Wiggins minutes. They're going to play him quite a bit, but I don't think Klay plays. They really like, these Jordan Poole, Gary Payton, pretty capable replacements there too. So I expect those guys to pick up minutes. Not having Iguodala though will put a little bit more pressure on Payton for defense. Him, Iguodala, obviously Draymond's out, Wiggins. Those are their main key defensive pieces. So taking Iguodala out makes Gary Payton a little bit more important, especially in this matchup. We'll definitely see Andrew Wiggins on Luka for the vast majority of this game, but still should see a little bit of Payton.
Peyton on Brunson would make a lot of sense in those scenarios as well. So, or Tim Hardaway Jr., whoever that kind of second scoring type guard is, alongside Luka. So I think we definitely can see a lot of Gary Payton in the second minutes tonight for Golden State. Okay, Pat Bev, questionable for Minnesota. He was kind of a game time decision and out last week over the weekend. So you think he returns tonight?
Yeah, he was expected to play on Sunday. Didn't play against the Nets in a big win for them. So he should be good. Also worth noting, it looks like Anthony Edwards is good to go, not an injury report. He had a really scary knee injury, couldn't put weight on his leg as he was helped to the locker room. So he's good to go. He said he was, quote, straight to Chris Finch after the game. So good. Youth is not wasted on the young if you have Anthony Edwards on your fantasy team. Looks like he's going to be good to go.
Yeah, and with Bev back in the mix, we already saw Malik Beasley's minutes starting to get pretty shaky. Got down to like 14 last game, something like that. So this could be the beginning of the end for Malik Beasley a little bit right now with how much they're trying to emphasize, they have enough offense with Jalen Noel with the way that he's played. So it looks like Noel may have just kind of jumped Beasley into this rotation long term.
Yeah, I was like thinking of like players who like weren't really rotation players who have been like solid as far as like super cool, nerdy, most improved player. Like he's got to be up there. Like guys that 95% of NBA fans don't know about. Like he would probably be one of the most improved players. He's really, really improved this year, just in so many different aspects of shooting the three more, getting into the paint more, not going on his mid range. So shout out to Jalen Noel.
There we have it. So I think we've covered everything for the injuries for tonight's 9-game slate. We will cover all of the DFS aspects of tonight's slate, 5:00 Eastern time behind the paywall over at Established Run with myself and Mike Gallagher. Once again, we'll be back tomorrow at 2:00 Eastern to go through all the injuries on another sizable slate on Wednesday. Thursday is going to be the short slate this week for us. If you are not subscribed to our premium content at Established Run, please at least consider subscribing to our YouTube channel here, get notifications when we go live on the air, and find all of our great free content. Help us continue to provide it for you. Hit that like button so we can help circulate this video and get more eyes on it. More people flowing in means more free content that we can put out there for all of you. So want to, from myself and Mike, want to wish you guys a happy Tuesday. Enjoy the games tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.